welcome to another episode of Learn with Gege. Today we are going to be using Scratch, a visual programming language, to create a very interesting game. We will be creating the ping pong game from beginning to the end. Hang on, as there is so much to learn today. So the first thing I want to do is to delete the cart because we do not need it in the course of this game. And then the next thing we want to do is to select a good backdrop for our game. In this case, we'll be using the neon tunnel. Okay, our backstage is fully loaded. The next thing we need the sprite. We'll be needing the sprites, the ball sprite. And here we go. We have the ball sprite right there. For the paddle, all we need to do is to create our own. So we'll go to paint and we would use this tool right here, and then we'll drag our paddle. We can change the color to what we want. We'll make it something like this. We can make adjustments. All right, and there we go. We have the paddle, and we'll drop it somewhere around here. Next, we want to also create the red line. And just like the paddle, all we need to do is to draw it as well. We want to change the color to a dark red, maybe a little brighter, and then we want to extend it from the end to end, and then we drop it somewhere around here. Okay, so we've got three sprites. We have the ball, we have the paddle, we have the red line. One more sprite and then we are good to go. The last sprite we want to make is the game over message, and to do that we paint again. We make use of the text tool. We click on the text tool and then we type game over. And then we can resize it appropriately. If it is too small, we can make it bigger, and then we can move it around. We can position it exactly where we want it to be, like this over on our screen. And if you pay attention, you'll see that whatever we do in the paint area is displayed on our stage. All right, now that we have built our four sprites, the next thing I want us to do quickly is to rename each of the sprites. So instead of sprite 1 right here, I am going to rename it to paddle. This is important because in the course of coding, it is important to name your objects properly. Okay, so I have renamed that to paddle. Remember, you can resize it, you can rotate it, and so many other things, but that's not what we are interested in today. So for sprite 2, instead of sprite 2, I am going to simply rename it as red line. And then instead of sprite 3, I am going to rename it as game over. Now that we've got our game idea, let's look at the sprites we'll be using. Each one has a critical job to make our ping pong game work. First, we'll be looking at the ball. It is the star of the show. The ball is what we are trying to keep in play. We'll program it to move, bounce off the walls, and most importantly, bounce off our paddle. Next, we will be looking at the paddle. It is the tool we will use to control the game, in this case, the green line. This sprite needs to follow the mouse movement. It is our tool for hitting the ball back up. Next is the red line. This guy acts as the game over trigger. We will use it to program the ball and check if the ball touches it, the game should come to an end. The last but not the least is the game over sprite. This is a text sprite. It will stay hidden for the entire game and only show up when the ball touches the red line. This lets the player know that they have lost the game and the game is now over. Alright, now we are set to begin coding, and we will start from the very first sprite, which is the ball. As you already know, the first item we need for every code is the event trigger. In this case, we are going to be using the green flag. This would initiate or trigger the beginning of our game. When green flag clicks, we want the ball to go to a random position, so we'll go to the motion blocks and we'll pick the go to random position. Next, we want to point in a particular direction and we want it to point 90. We change the 90 to 45. Then we want a control block, which is a forever block, because we want this ball to keep moving on and on. And inside that forever block, we want to move, for now, we want to move 15 steps. And then we want a very important condition. If on edge, bounce. Whenever the ball touches the edge, we want it to bounce. Also, we want another set of code starting with a green flag. We want a forever block. Inside the forever block, we want to check while the ball is bouncing around. If at any point it touches, we need an if condition. If at any point it touches the paddle. So we'll go to sensing and then we'll pick this and then we'll change it to paddle. If touching the paddle, then we should be able to update the score. But for us to have a score, we need to go to the variables and make a variable called score. Let's do that quickly. So, having made the variable, we can now come here and change score by 1. So every time the paddle hits the ball for it to bounce back, we get a score of 1. And then we want the ball to turn in a certain way. We want it to turn, but in this case, we want it to turn in a random way. So we'll change that and we want it to turn 170, between 170 and 190 degrees. Next, we will also want it to move. So we'll bring a move block right here. And we want it to still move 15 steps. And we want it to wait a little, so we'll add a wait block right here and alright, so this is all we have to do for the ball, and we can test it briefly. You can see the ball is moving, and every time it touches the paddle, we get an update of our score. You can see that yourself. Okay, so next we want to code the paddle, because if you can see, the paddle does not have any code right now. So just as always, we bring the event trigger, which is when the green flag is clicked, and we want a forever block because we want to control it to move forever. And then the next thing, we want to set X to mouse. Set X to mouse. It's right here. So now let's test again. You can see that your paddle is now moving, unlike before where it wasn't responding to any form of movement. But you see that the ball hits the red line and there's nothing happening. So that takes us to the next sprite, which is the red line. Okay, so once again we bring the green flag. We want the line to go to the bottom. That is, if we have not positioned it, we want it to go to the bottom of the screen. So we bring up this and then we change it to -3 and -171. This is the position we want the red line to be as soon as the game starts. Then we want the forever block again, and inside the forever block we want an if then to check for a condition. And the condition we are checking for right now is if the ball touches the red line, what should happen? If the ball touches the red line, in this case, if it touches the ball. Okay, then we want to broadcast broadcasts, and we will change the broadcast to stop. And finally, once we broadcast stop, we go to control and then we stop all. We stop everything from working, which means all the codes, all the sprites would respect this particular block of code to stop all their activities. Having done this, the last but not the least guy we would be looking at is the game over sprite. So for this guy as well, we start with the event block. When a green flag is clicked, we want it to set the score. So we go to variables and set my variable, but we change the variable name to score. Set my score to 0, and then we don't want the game over to be displayed while the game is going on, so we would hide it. And finally, when I receive stop, we want it to display. We want it to display at this point. As soon as we receive stop, we want the game over to now be displayed. And like I have always said, we will test again to see. So as soon as I click on the green flag, you can see that my score is now 0. And every time I hit the paddle, there is an update of the score. And as soon as I was unable to hit the ball and it touches the red line, my game comes to an end and I have a score of 4. Thank you for hanging on up to this point. Stay tuned for another exciting episode.